Hello everyone, welcome to this video. The theme of today's video is why do the DPSI, the Diploma in Public Service Interpreting? The first thing I should say is that this video is just based on my own opinions, my own views. You might agree or disagree with them. This is just what I think about this topic, and it's really just some information that you should that I think you should, maybe consider when deciding whether to do the DPSI or not, whether it's the right qualification for you or not. It is by no means an exhaustive discussion on the topic. And if, after watching the video, you still have questions or doubts, feel free to contact me, feel free to post on the comments below if you've got any questions, and I'll be more than happy to, to answer. I just to give you a bit of background about myself, I've got more than 20 years experience working in this industry, in the public service interpreting industry. I used to work for an agency as a senior manager for about 12 years. I've been working as a freelance, public service interpreter for about 20 odd years in all sectors of the industry. I'm a trainer of public service interpreters and translators. I have designed training programs. I have worked on the procurement side of things, handling contracts in public service interpreting. So I've got a reasonable understanding of how most sectors of this industry work, and I'm just going to try and convey some of that information that I think is important, in this topic, to kind of help you make a decision on, whether to do the DPSI or not. Okay, first of all, I'm going to this video is going to be divided into 3 sections. First of all, what is the DPSI? If you've never heard of it, maybe you're kind of new to the industry, or you've not really you've thought about interpreting, but you don't really know how things work. Okay, it's important to explain what the DPSI is. Secondly, why do we need it, and some positives and negatives about it. So the DPSI is not a perfect qualification, but it is an important qualification, and I think it's important to mention both the positive and the negative aspects to kind of help you make an informed and balanced assessment according to your own circumstances, and to make an informed decision whether it's the right qualification for you or not. Okay, so first of all, what is the DPSI? The DPSI is a professional qualification. Okay, so it's not an academic qualification, it's a professional qualification. In other words, it's a qualification that was created to meet the needs of a specific sector. So you get professional qualifications in different fields. You've got professional qualifications in accountancy and engineering, and this one just happens to be in interpreting. So it was designed specifically for the public service interpreting industry. So it's a qualification designed for interpreters that work in the public sector with public bodies, places like courts, police, hospitals, social work, housing departments, so on and so forth. It has 3 pathways, so that you can sit the DPSI in 3 different options, so to speak: health, local government, and law. So the first question I tend to get asked a lot is, which one is better? What's the best one to do? If I'm new to the industry, I don't really know where to start. Where am I going to get most work? What's the most interesting? Well, and the answer is I don't know. It depends on your personal circumstances. I couldn't possibly, tell you, with absolute certainty, oh, health is best for you or law is best for you. It depends on you. One thing I can say is the local government option doesn't tend to have a lot of demands. In fact, and once again, I'm speaking from my own experience, the local government option tends to have next to 0 demands in Scotland. Okay, so if you decide to do the local government option, you should decide to do it because you've got very specific reason according to your own circumstances. Maybe you already work for a local government organization, and maybe it's a qualification you're thinking of doing because you're a bilingual speaker, and that might help enrich your CV and might help you, in your career in local government, not necessarily within interpreting, but maybe working with bilingual speakers. I don't know, maybe some specific circumstances, and you decide to do it specifically for that. That's absolutely fine. But as far as public service interpreters are concerned, normally it's an option that's that doesn't have, and once again, this is for Scotland where I'm based, doesn't have much demand. The situation might be different in other areas of the UK. I think generally it is definitely the least popular of the three options. So if you don't know which option to go for, normally I would say, okay, well, set that one aside or exclude that one as a starting point, and your decision should be probably between health and law, because that's where most of the work is. Okay, which one of these two is best then? Well, they're equally fine. It depends on, maybe, or the first thing you should think about is maybe, okay, what if I'm going to pursue a career as a public service interpreter, where do I see myself working in 5 or 10 years time? Would I like to be a court interpreter? Would I like to be working with the police, immigration, home office, prisons, or would I, do I think I would prefer to work with patients in hospitals, GPs, health practices, and so on? And that's probably the most important factor. Which kind of work do you think you would enjoy most? And secondly, where's your background? If you've got a background in nursing, for example, or you've trained as a police officer or something like that. So if you've got that kind of background already, maybe sitting an option within your field of expertise might make it easier for you to pass the exam, because the DPSI is an exam. Okay, the DPSI isn't a course. You get preparation courses to prepare you for the exam. They give you lots of really, really valuable training. But ultimately, the DPSI is a test. You have to pass that final test to get your DPSI diploma. And, having all this experience, all this knowledge will probably, make your, preparation for this final exam, a little bit easier. So, these are maybe some of the things you can consider when deciding, which option is best for you. There's two accrediting bodies in the UK. The first one is the CIoL, the Chartered Institute of Linguists, and the second one is the TQUK, Training and Qualifications UK. They're both the same in terms of value these days, as far as I'm aware. And once again, I'm speaking for Scotland. Both accreditations have got the same value. Both DPSIs are accredited, through at level 6 through Ofqual. So they've got the same final kind of parent accreditation. So they're the same, as far as as far as I'm aware. So I think these days there's no difference between the two. The only thing you should pay attention to is if you decide to register for a DPSI course which isn't accredited through either of these. Okay, that should ring alarm bells. You want to do a DPSI that is going to be recognized, not just a course that someone decided to offer and called the DPSI. Okay, make sure that your DPSI course and exam is accredited through either of these two bodies. Okay, why do we need the DPSI? Why should interpreters be doing the DPSI? Well, first of all, it's a professional standard. If we're professionals, if we want to be treated as professionals, if we want to be considered as professionals, if we want to call ourselves professionals, we should have something that shows that we are professional, and not just expect people to take our word for it. So not just expect people to accept, oh, I've been working for 12 years or 20 years or 40 years, but I don't have any qualifications, and once again, this is my view, my opinion. A professional interpreter should be able to have something to show that he or she is a professional interpreter, and the DPSI is the gold standard. There isn't really any other qualifications that have the same kind of wide recognition as the DPSI. So that's the first thing. If we value ourselves as professionals, we should be willing to undertake the training to make sure that we are doing our job properly, that we know what we're doing, and that we have developed the skills, and something that a bit of paper that we can show someone if they do query us. Also, you will find for a lot of work a lot of more high-level work. If you don't have the DPSI, you will be automatically set aside, even if you have 10, 20, 30 years of experience. And once again, I used to be a senior manager for an agency, and I've had long discussions with other colleagues who used to be senior managers for other agencies, throughout the country, and this tends to happen, as far as I'm aware, pretty much everywhere, because if you've got a very high profile, high court case, the Scottish Court Service or the Crown Office can't really take a chance, because it's going to attract a lot of media attention. So they want the best of the best. And the best of the best is not going to be someone without any qualifications. It's going to be someone with a DPSI. And that might be a 6-month trial, a 3-month trial, a 4-month trial. So that one job will keep you very busy and make you a lot of money, but only if you've got the qualifications to show for it. Secondly, I've already kind of started talking about this topic. You will get preference for some work, just because of the way the public service industry works in this country, and certainly in Scotland. Most of the public sector work tends to be put out to tender, and basically what this means is that the Scottish government or an NHS board or a social work department, they will basically put out a public competition, that companies bid for, and then whichever company wins that contract basically supplies the interpreters. So in kind of rough terms, that's basically how it works. And normally those contracts tend to specify, especially the main contracts, the big ones, tend to specify that DPSI interpreters should get preference for work if available. The Scottish government contract, for example, certainly states that. And what that means is that and that includes court work and police work in Scotland. So in Scotland, if you've got a DPSI, technically, in theory, you should get preference for some work in your area. So that means that you should technically get more work. Now, whether you do get more work or not, or how that actually works from an operational point of view, depends on the agencies that hold the contract, and depends how they allocate, on their allocation criteria and so on. And I couldn't possibly speak for that, because I don't know, but I can just tell you what's done on paper. You will get a higher rate of pay, or you should get a higher rate of pay with most agencies that hold these contracts as well. So to my knowledge, I think there's very few agencies these days that don't differentiate in terms of rates for DPSI and non-DPSI interpreters. And I don't want to quote specific figures for rates. I think that's a topic maybe for a discussion some other time. But the rate difference tends to be about, and these are kind of just rough figures, they tend to be about £4 to £5 an hour. So a DPSI interpreter tends to get on average £4 or £5 an hour more than a non-DPSI interpreter. So if you're planning to pursue this career long term, it'll be a much more viable career if you have the DPSI, because you'll be getting the higher rate of pay. Okay, if you are doing 20-25 hours of interpreting a week, that's going to be about £5,000 more a year, roughly, that you would get, so it's a substantial difference in financial terms. So if this is your main activity, if you're looking at this as your activity long term, then you should, in my view, 100% be thinking about doing the DPSI, about obtaining this qualification. If for no any other reason, at least for the kind of financial aspect, because you'll get more money. Simple as that. Also, the industry is changing. The industry is changing. I've been in this industry for 20 years. This industry has been in constant evolution. It's a fairly young industry, and and it's an industry that's becoming more technology dependent, and it's being affected by new technologies and so on quite a lot. But especially within the last couple of years, with the onset of the pandemic, COVID-19, we saw kind of a speeding up of this process. So this process have changed, became a lot more accelerated, and it was interesting because things like telephone interpreting, which had been kind of falling out of favor in the industry over the last kind of 10-15 years, suddenly became very popular, obviously because just because of needs, and video interpreting saw an explosion in terms of demands, and in terms of market share. It's certainly a much bigger chunk of the market than it was before. Video interpreting used to be an insignificant slice of the markets 2.5 years ago, and these days in some sectors it can account for as much as 40% more than that, okay, of the work out there. So the industry is changing now, and these basically and interpreters are kind of having to change and adapt to the industry, but I don't even want to go into that, because once again that's maybe a theme for a discussion another time. But for us as public service interpreters, I know of lots of interpreters that were, have been working for a long time, and they always thought, there's no need to do the DPSI because I make enough money and I can't be bothered, and whatever, I'm happy with what I get. And then things, the unexpected happens. COVID-19 happens. Who could have expected? And suddenly, everybody's out of work. The NHS. There was one. I shouldn't mention any specific names, but there was one major health board in Scotland that's, basically stopped using all their interpreters overnight. Interpreters, overnight, kind of had no work. And, they moved to telephone interpreting, and then they're using telephone interpreters down south. So, competition is bigger amongst freelancers. So it's no longer, I'm the only Portuguese interpreter in my area, so it's fine, work's going to come to me anyway, so I don't really need to bother with this qualification. No, it's changing now, because agencies are using telephone interpreters. Now they can use someone based in Manchester, in Newcastle, in London, in Thurso on the north of Scotland, I don't know, somewhere in the Isle of Skye, wherever that interpreter may be, as long as they have a good internet connection. So there's that extra competition for you. The other side of the coin as well is that there's more possibilities and there's more opportunities for us. If you do have qualifications, if you do have experience, if you do have the know-how, then the market is suddenly just become bigger for you, and there should be more opportunities for you as well to find work from some of these agencies that in the past you wouldn't even have considered because they aren't in your region. But once again, that all depends on your qualifications. And if you just sent your CV to an agency saying, I've been working as a freelance interpreter for 7 years, but I don't have any qualifications. No, well done. There's a lot of other people in your situation. But if you've got the DPSI, then you automatically jump ahead of 99% of the markets, because 99% of the interpreters out there don't have the DPSI, unfortunately. And let's hope that changes in the near future. So that's one important thing to think about. The industry is changing and is going to change more. And one way to protect your job, to protect your activity, is to make sure that you are well qualified, that you have experience, that you have qualifications. If the market, if demand goes down, if the unexpected happens like COVID-19, if other things happen, people are going to lose their jobs. Okay, but you want to make sure that you are one of the top interpreters, so you're less likely to lose as much work as someone else who doesn't have any qualifications, any experience, and there might be other opportunities for you that other people aren't going to get. And finally, it's an unregulated industry. Okay, and what that means is that there's some countries where the interpreting profession is regulated by the government. There's some standards, there's codes of conduct, there's sometimes even set rates that interpreters are expected to get, and so on and so forth. In the UK, that doesn't happen. it's 100% unregulated, and there's lots of people doing really good work to try and make sure that this industry is regulated. There's lots of good projects out there, but it's still an unregulated industry. And in unregulated industries, any unregulated industry, the key denominator tends to be money, and costs. Okay, price and cost. So this is normally, not in all cases, but in the vast majority of cases, this tends to be the key denominator, the key deciding factor. And what that means is that and this is the reason why over the last 20 years we've seen a drop in rates, because the police or the courts are not limited to using an interpreter that has the DPSI. They can use someone else if they want to. And if I'm João Madeira and I'll only work for, I don't know, £40 an hour, but then there's someone else without the DPSI that will work for 12, then if the client has no preference, then the agency will send a £12 guy because it's cheaper and they make more money. So in very simplistic terms, I'm not saying that this is what happens, but in very simplistic terms, this is an illustration of the process. So because it's an unregulated industry, one of the things you can do to kind of protect yourself once again and to fight that is make sure that you are as well qualified and as good as you can possibly be. And once again, one of the things you can do is or one of the things you should do is to get a DPSI, because then if a client, as it is starting to happen now, if a client says, okay, look, we've got preference for the DPSI interpreters, such as the Scottish Court Service. Okay, well, then you can put your hand up and say, well, I'm amongst that group, so please pick me. Whereas if you're not amongst that group, then you have to basically get the scraps, or hope that you have a very good working relationship with whichever agency has got the contract. And bear in mind that these contracts tend to go up for retender every 3 to 4 years. So just because you've got a very good working relationship with agency A, it doesn't mean that agency B is not going to get the contracts in the near future. Okay, so suddenly you might lose that privileged relationship you've got with that agency. And when you approach agency B, they'll just say, well, you don't have the DPSI, and actually we've got some other guy here that does have the DPSI. So you know what? Thank you very much for applying, but actually we're going to use this other person, and we'll send you some work if we can. Thank you for applying. So you don't want to be in that situation when things change, if you're thinking of these as a kind of long-term career. So you have to protect your profession, protect your income. Okay, moving on, some positives and negatives about the DPSI. One negative thing about it is that at the moment still it's pretty much an all or nothing qualification. And what I mean by these is that the public sector, the Scottish government and other public sector bodies, they have been, to be fair to them, over the last 10 years or so, I've seen that they have been trying to kind of make sure that there are some sort of standards to the service that they're getting, and they have made some token efforts, not any real efforts, and you can quote me on that, but they have made some token efforts, for example, by saying, okay, fine, we want interpreters to have the DPSI, and these days they call it the DPSI or equivalent, which is pretty much meaningless, but that's a discussion once again for another video. But still, to this day, it is the one thing that they've picked up, and as okay, we need some sort of quality standard. What should we? Okay, well, we'll say that everybody needs to have the DPSI. Okay, so and agencies tend to use that quite in a very kind of literal fashion. So you might have, for example, an MA in conference interpreting from, say, Heriot University or Leeds University or whatever else. Yeah, you studied for 4 years, or you did a postgrad for 2 years or a year, whatever, and you got your qualification, and you technically trained and you qualified to actually a higher standard than the DPSI. bearing in mind it's an academic qualification, not a professional qualification. But anyway, and you approach an agency and you say, okay, well, I don't have the DPSI, but I've got these. And they'll say, oh yeah, but you don't have the DPSI, so you get the low rates. Because it's, quite often they approach that very literally. That is starting to change a little bit, but still, to this day, the safe way of making sure you get that preference for jobs, you get that high rates with every agency is basically still to to have the DPSI, irrespective of whichever other qualifications you have, even if they're kind of higher qualifications. And other qualifications have limited recognition, and this includes other professional qualifications. So there's these days there's the CCI, the certificate in community interpreting, and there's other kind of diplomas out there, and all of these are very, very limited recognition. And I know of interpreters that have had some struggles trying to get that recognized, to get the higher rate of pay amongst agencies, and then suddenly you're wondering, okay, why did I bother spending 9 months, a year studying and paying for these qualifications when it's not getting me anywhere? It's something that should change. It's something that is changing and is likely to change more in the kind of near to mid-term future. But still to this day, the DPSI is the safest way. If you're looking for one qualification that's going to open all doors for you, and you shouldn't have any issues, it's the DPSI. Whereas others, you might get somewhere with agency A, but not with agency B, and so on. And there are contracts out there, like the Ministry of Justice, for example, that have tried to create some sort of framework to recognize other qualifications. But they're still kind of, very restricted, very limited to certain sectors, and sometimes open to interpretation. So once again, the kind of safest way is to just make sure you get this qualification if you can. One of the things I dislike the most about the DPSI is that this exam that you sit is actually not a true reflection of how our industry works in Scotland. Okay, these qualifications are created by organizations in England. They reflect how the industry works in England. In Scotland, we've got different systems, different procedures. We've got a legal system that is substantially different. And the DPSI is really not a true reflection of how our industry works. And some of it is, and some of it really isn't. And some of the things you do in the DPSI you will not do in real life. So but this is something we have to live with, for the time being, for us, living in Scotland. We just kind of get on with it. As long as you join a good course with a good tutor that knows, the industry and knows what they're talking about, they should be able to kind of highlight, these differences for you. If not, then you'll find out once you start working as a public service interpreter. But this is something to kind of be aware of. One of the things, for example, is one of the questions we get asked quite a lot is why do I have to do written translations in as part of the DPSI? Well, there are, I understand there's organizations in England where you would be expected as a public service interpreter to do a certain degree of translation. This happens quite a lot. It can happen with the police in England and so on. In Scotland, it doesn't. In Scotland, it just doesn't. Or if it does, it's very, very, very rare. And there's a clear, in Scotland, there's a clear difference between an interpreter and a translator. And when you go out to interpret for someone, you're an interpreter, you're not a translator. Okay, you might be asked to interpret, a couple of sentences, or maybe because they want to post a note through someone's letterbox, that kind of thing. But you shouldn't be asked to translate statements. You shouldn't be asked to translate evidence for a case. You shouldn't be asked to translate social work reports and so on and so forth. So things like that, they're really not a true reflection of the kind of work we do. Unfortunately, it's the DPSI is what the DPSI is, and we just have to live with it, and we just have to pass that exam to make sure that we get the qualification. The next one is kind of positive and negative, feature of the DPSI. So the DPSI is all about the exam. You could be the best interpreter in the world. If you don't do well in the exam, you won't pass. It's a practical exam. And it's just about how well you perform some practical tasks. This is good and bad because, if you're a weaker interpreter, there's the scope that you might be on a good day, you might be feeling well, maybe it's an easier task. You get a little bit lucky with your examiner who's maybe a little bit more lenient, or I don't know, things going your way and you do well. Similarly, you might be a very good interpreter, but you're having a really bad day, you've got a headache, you can't concentrate, it's just a shame. There are resets, so you get a chance to reset if that happens. It's really, it can be very frustrating to have to reset an exam, but it's not the end of the world. The DPSI, a positive aspect, it should open doors for you. It really should open doors for you. Once again, lots of interpreters say, why should I do the DPSI when nobody else has it? Well, that's precisely the reason why you should do the DPSI. If nobody else in your language, in your region has the DPSI, you should be the one doing it. Okay. If you study business, for example, you look at lots of case studies, and one of the big case studies that lots of business schools like to talk about is Coca-Cola. Biggest food company in the world, Coca-Cola and Nestle, but Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola is also the company that spends the most money on advertising worldwide, on marketing and advertising. Why bother? Why spend so much money if they're number one anyway, if everybody prefers Coca-Cola anyway? But I'm not saying that everybody prefers Coca-Cola, but it's just an example. Why should they spend that? Because they want to continue to be number one. That's why. And this is how your mindset should be as a freelance interpreter. If you're doing well, you should look for ways to do even better, okay, to make sure that the situation doesn't change, to make sure that you'll continue doing well until such time as you decide to retire. Which basically covers the last topic of job security. It should make your career a lot more stable, a lot more secure. If these contracts change agencies, you could change agencies as well, and the new agencies should want to register you, because you do have the qualifications and the experience required, and you're not just relying on goodwill and luck, which I think is a bad way to plan a career. So that's about it for this video. Once again, this is not an exhaustive discussion on this topic. It's just kind of highlighting some of the kind of things you should be thinking about, highlighting why the DPSI is important, some of the things you should think about. If you've got any questions, if you've got any comments, feel free to post on the comments section. I'll be more than happy to answer them. You can also send me a private message. I'll post some more information on the comments, on the video description below. I will also post some information on the DPSI courses that I teach. So I'm also a DPSI tutor. I run these courses every year. So if you're interested in some of my courses, or if you're interested in finding out about maybe a local provider to you, that I can help you with that. We offer an online DPSI course, and if you're interested, just feel free to send me a message. If you enjoyed the video, please like the video. That will help me a lot, and please subscribe to the channel. And thank you very much. Have a nice day and have a happy new year.